Mira's boots crunched through the brittle crust of the dead glacier, each step a calculated risk on the vast, wind-scoured expanse. The air bit like shattered glass, sharp enough to numb her lips before she'd gone a kilometer from the outpost. Behind her, the stripped-down vanguard team moved in tight formation, Thomas Rhee at her flank, his pack humming faintly with the reactor coils he jury-rigged last night. Lise Arden, the young cryomancer, bundled in thermal weaves that did little to hide her tense shoulders, and two scouts, Hale and Voss, trailing with sensor probes extended like wary antennae. Satellite feeds had lit up Command's feeds 2 days ago, cracks spiderwebbing the ice cap, hinting at a hollow big enough to swallow a forward base. Mira had volunteered her unit for the survey, knowing full well it was a suicide nod from the brass, still smarting over her demotion. No reinforcements, no heavy gear, just them against the glacier's ancient grudge. "Wind's picking up," Thomas muttered, his voice crackling through the comms bead in her ear. He adjusted his goggles, scanning the horizon where the ice met a sky bruised purple by perpetual dusk. Sensors show microfractures ahead. We push or we loop back. Mira didn't break stride. Push. Settlements downridge can't wait for another storm to bury the readouts. Her breath fogged the inside of her mask, but she felt the old pull in her gut, the one that had kept her squad alive through worse than this until it hadn't. She glanced at Lise, who hadn't spoken since dawn. The girl clutched her staff like a lifeline, its crystal tip glowing faintly against the cold. Mira trusted her skills, if not her silences. They crested a ridge, and the ground trembled, a low groan from the ice itself. Voss cursed, dropping to a knee as his probe whirred. "Shaft opening, Captain. 50 meters out. Unstable as hell." Mira signaled halt, her gloved hand slicing the air. The team fanned out, stakes firing into the ice to anchor them. The shaft yawned like a fresh wound, edges jagged and shedding powder that swirled into the void. Standard descent rigs deployed from their packs, but as the first drone hummed down, the walls shivered. A crack split the ice with a sound like breaking bone, and the rig's cable snapped taut, then frayed. "Pull back," Mira barked, but the vibration bucked her footing. She slid toward the edge, harness biting into her hips as she clawed for purchase. Below, the drone's light flickered into darkness, lost to the depths. Tomas was there in an instant, slamming his ice axe into solid ground and uncoiling a secondary line from his belt. "Grab on!" He tossed it her way, the cable whipping through the air. Mira lunged, fingers closing around it, just as her boot skidded over the lip. Weight yanked her down, the harness creaking, but Thomas braced, muscles straining under his layers. His face twisted in the wind, goggles fogged, but he held, pouring his strength into the line until she could hook her carabiner. "Got you," he grunted, hauling her up inch by inch. Voss and Hale threw their weight into the anchors, and together they dragged her back. Mira rolled onto firm ice, chest heaving, the cold seeping through her suit like accusation. Thomas slumped beside her, rubbing his shoulder, but his eyes met hers with that steady glint. No words needed. He'd patched worse falls in the field. "Rigs are toast," he said finally, eyeing the severed cable. "But I've got the bore. Portable model, drilled canyons in the rift wars. It'll chew through, but the shaft's shifting. One wrong pulse and we're avalanche fodder." Mira nodded, pushing to her feet. "Do it. We're not climbing back empty-handed." Tomas worked fast, unpacking the ice bore from his sled, a squat cylinder of alloy and fusion coils humming with contained fury. He synced it to his gauntlet, fingers dancing over the controls as it bit into the ice. Shavings exploded outward in a frigid spray, the machine whining as it carved a narrow chute. The team repelled in pairs, harnesses taut against the vibrating walls. Mira went last with Tomas, the bore's heat radiating up like a false promise of warmth. A tremor shook loose a slab midway down. It glanced off her shoulder, numbing her arm, but she gritted through, focusing on the faint glow of Lisa's staff below. They hit the cavern floor with a jolt, boots sinking into powder that had once been liquid eons ago. The space stretched vast, a cathedral of ice lit by chem looms from their packs. Stalactites hung like frozen spears, and the air hummed with an unnatural chill, thicker than the surface wind. "Scans clear," Voss reported, his voice echoing. "No hostiles, but look at that." Mira followed his beam. At the cavern's heart loomed a monolith of layered ice, translucent walls veined with glowing sigils, runes etched in a script that twisted like living frost. Encased within, coiled in impossible majesty, was a dragon. Scales of deepest indigo gleamed through the ice, wings folded like storm sails, horns curling back from a head the size of a siege tank. Its chest rose and fell in slow, labored rhythm, eyes closed but nostrils flaring faint vapor. Majestic, yes, but the sheer mass of it pressed the air, a predator's presence that made Mira's pulse thunder. "Gods," Hale whispered, crossing himself. "It's real, not some old tale." Lyse stepped forward, her face paling under the looms. She traced a rune in the air with her staff, and it pulsed in response. "These aren't natural, human work, binding magic, old but deliberate. The sigils, they're holding it in stasis." Mira's skin prickled. "Explain, now." Lyse hesitated, eyes flicking to the dragon as if it might stir. "I'm tied to this. The Order of the Pale Sun. They trained me. These wards aren't just prison, they're siphons, meant to draw the dragon's essence, its frost fire, into conduits for our rights. Control the beast, control the cold itself." The confession hung heavy, like the cavern's weight overhead. Thomas shot Mira a look, his hand drifting to his sidearm, but she waved him off. Lisa's eyes were wide with something raw, fear, maybe regret. Mira had vetted her for the cryomancy, not the secrets. But out here, secrets killed slower than blades. "Sensors spiking," Voss cut in, his pad beeping urgently. "Glacial surges above. Ice is mobilizing. If this hollow destabilizes, it'll calve the whole cap. Settlements in the trough. Gone." Mira stared at the dragon, the runes flickering dimmer now, as if the prison weakened with their presence. Abandon it, and the glacier might claim thousands. Stay. And they tampered with something that could end them all. Her demotion flashed, sacrificing her squad for secrets. Not again. "We break it. Lyse, counter ritual. Thomas, power it." "Are you—" Thomas started, but the cavern rumbled, dust sifting from the ceiling. "Now," Mira snapped, "or we all pay." Lyse nodded, planting her staff at the ice's base. She chanted low, words weaving through the air like threads of frost, unraveling the sigils one by one. Thomas knelt beside her, cracking open his pack's reactor core, a portable fusion heart glowing blue-white. He jury-rigged conduits from it to her staff, hands steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. "Overload risk," he warned. "This'll burn hot." The runes shattered first, a cascade of cracks like thunder, ice splintering in arcs of blue fire. The dragon stirred, a roar building in its throat that vibrated Mira's bones. Then the thaw hit. Steam erupted in geysers, the cavern quaking as the prison melted in violent surges. A slab calved from above, slamming down. Hale's scream cut short as it crushed him against the wall, blood blooming dark on the ice. Mira lunged for Voss, yanking him clear as fissures spiderwebbed the floor. "Fall back." But the dragon was free now, scales shedding ice in sheets, wings unfurling with a sound like tearing canvas. It reared, eyes snapping open, slits of molten silver that pinned them all. The beast, Varen, though she didn't know the name yet, shook free of the last bindings, his form towering, claws gouging stone. Steam coiled from his maw, and he spoke, voice a grinding rumble in archaic tones that clawed at her mind. "Mortals, aid me. The ward's breach wakes the deeper chill, worse than I stirs in the roots." The glacier above groaned, fractures racing like veins. Mira's team huddled, weapons drawn, but the dragon's gaze fixed on her, assessing, ancient. He lowered his head, a talon extending, drawing a bead of her blood with impossible precision. "Knowledge I offer, tactician of men." The dragon's voice rumbled through the cavern like grinding ice, low and resonant, carrying the weight of forgotten eras. Mira felt the sting on her thumb where his talon had pricked her, a single drop of blood welling up, absorbed into the iridescent scale that gleamed like frozen moonlight. Her team lingered at the shaft's edge above, their shouts muffled as they rigged cables and braces to shore up the collapsing tunnel. Fractures spiderwebbed the ceiling, dust sifting down in cold veils. But down here in the chamber's heart, it was just her and this ancient predator. Varen, he'd named himself in that first guttural whisper. His eyes, vast as storm fronts, pinned her without blinking. Knowledge for alliance, he continued, his breath a frosty plume that didn't warm the air. Wings folded tight against his sinuous body, he loomed larger than the chamber itself seemed to allow, scales etched with runes that pulsed faintly blue. Terrifying, yes, claws like scythes, jaws that could crush a snowcat whole. But there was an awe in it too, a majesty that made her pulse steady rather than race. This wasn't some beast, it was a force unbound after centuries. Mira wiped her thumb on her parka, tasting copper on her lips from the adrenaline. Her squad was exposed up there, Thomas barking orders to secure the winch. Lice murmuring incantations to freeze loose stones in place. They needed time, and so did she. The glacial advance wasn't natural. Reports from the cities spoke of blizzards that swallowed outposts whole, a creeping doom that no vanguard strategy could outflank. If this dragon knew anything— "I don't bind deals in blood lightly," she said, voice steady despite the ache in her chest from the squad she'd lost years ago. Stubborn pragmatism had kept her alive then. It would now. "You want freedom. I want my people safe. The ice is marching south, devouring settlements, choking supply lines. Help us stop it, and I'll hunt the ones who chained you. No tricks, no collars." Varen's head tilted, a low hiss escaping his nostrils like steam from a fissure. He shifted, the ground trembling under his bulk, and Mira braced against the chill radiating from his hide. For a moment she thought he'd laugh or strike. Instead, he spoke, words weaving through her mind like threads of frost. "Tactician of fragile flesh, the ice you fear is no whim of winter. I remember fragments, the order of the pale sun, humans in white robes wielding rights older than your steel. They bound me 700 years past, after I refused their harness, but before that, before they tested their grand design. A ritual to freeze the world, to remake it in their image. Prototype, they called it, a cage for the skies themselves." Mira's breath caught. The order, whispers from her demotion hearings, shadows in command briefings. She'd dismissed them as myth, a scapegoat for failed ops. But if they were real, and this dragon's jailers— "They're behind the advance now? The whole thing?" "Seeds of it," Varen growled, eyes narrowing to slits. "The ritual echoes. I feel it in the veins of the glacier. They architected your catastrophe, little captain, to bend knees and claim thrones." She glanced up at the shaft, where Lisa's voice cut through the din. Sharp, urgent. The cryomancer had gone pale in the cavern's glow earlier, staring at Varen like he'd clawed open her world. Mira climbed the loose scree to the base of the ladder, signaling the team down. They descended in tense silence, rifles slung but hands twitching. Thomas hit the ground first, eyes flicking between her and the dragon, his face a mask of guarded calculation. Lise followed, her frost-gloved hands clenched, and the rest, 4 hardened scouts, fanned out, breaths fogging. Lise wouldn't meet Mira's gaze at first, her indoctrinated poise cracking like thin ice. She'd been recruited for her affinity, pulled from some cloistered academy, but the cavern had shattered that. "Captain," she started, voice barely above the drip of melting rime. "What we saw, it's not just a relic. The Order, they're embedded in command now. Pale sun initiates in every major outpost, whispering in ears. If they learn you broke the seal—" She swallowed, torn eyes darting to Varen's coiled form. "They'll call it treason, execution for all of us. Tampering with a sealed dragon is heresy under the theocracy's code." Mira's gut twisted, survivors' guilt flaring hot, mingled with the old rage at orders that chewed up lives for secrets. She'd lost her rank for less. Now this could bury her squad. but turning back meant dooming the cities to the freeze. "Then we don't let them learn," she said flatly, pulling the radio from her pack. Static hissed as she keyed it, falsifying the report with clipped efficiency. Seismic survey complete, structural anomalies noted, no threats. Routine. She signed it off, heart pounding as she ordered blackout, no transmissions, no beacons. Central Command would smell the lie eventually. Her career was ash already, but her people, they'd live a little longer. Tomas watched her, jaw tight, but he nodded once and turned to his gear. The sergeant was a wizard with logistics, turning scraps into survival, but this stretched even him. As the team broke camp in the chamber's edge, Varen shrinking his form with a ripple of magic, coiling like a serpent to fit the shadows, Thomas worked quietly. He rerouted their sled rations, siphoning fuel cells from emergency caches, bundling medkits tighter than regulations allowed. "Overland march," he muttered to Mira later, as they lashed packs under the dragon's watchful eye. "With him, we'll burn through supplies like tinder. Have to hit the outposts, strip what we can from civilian stores. It's not pretty, but it'll keep us moving." She nodded, the weight settling heavier. Stripping civilians meant resentment, maybe riots when the freeze hit harder. But hesitation killed faster. Dawn bled gray through the cavern mouth 2 days later, the team trudging south through knee-deep drifts. Varen lumbered behind, his bulk camouflaged by blizzards he summoned, swirling veils of snow that hid his scales but chilled them to the bone. Mira led point, carbine slung low, her mind mapping routes around patrols. The air hummed with tension, every shadow felt like eyes. They reached Outpost Epsilon by midday, a remote monitoring station perched on a ridge, its wind turbines whining against the gale. The civilians there, techs and families huddled against the encroaching cold, eyed their vanguard patches warily. Mira's request for the emergency generator was polite at first, priority requisition for glacial ops. But the station chief, a grizzled woman with frostbite scars, crossed her arms. "Negative, Captain. We've got our own freeze warnings. HQ cleared it for us. Take it, and we're dark." Mira's patience frayed, the pragmatic ruthlessness surfacing like a blade. She unslung her carbine, leveling it not at the chief, but the control panel behind her. "This isn't a debate. Hand it over, or I make the call." The team's hands hovered near weapons. Varen's distant rumble vibrated the snow, a warning growl masked by wind. The chief paled, compliance bitter as she keyed the release. They loaded the generator onto a sled, the outpost's lights flickering out in their wake. Mira felt the scar forming already, her command fracturing under necessity. Tomas pulled her aside as they crested the next rise, his voice low and edged with hurt. "That wasn't you back there. Seizing from your own? You're turning into the brass you hate, sacrificing the little guy for the big play." His eyes, usually steady, held accusation, the moral anchor she'd relied on now straining like a frayed line. He'd lost his brother to orders like hers once. This echoed too close. She met his gaze, guilt gnawing but unyielding. "If we don't move fast, there's no little guy left, Thomas. The freeze takes them all." But his words lingered, a crack in her resolve. Far to the north, in a spire of theocratic ice that pierced the capital's smog, High Inquisitor Kalinmar stood before a bank of crystal monitors, his white robes unstained by the chill. The doctored transmission from Mira's unit flickered across the screen, too clean, too evasive. He traced a rune on the console, and the display bloomed with spectral data, an energy spike, jagged and unmistakable, a broken seal, Varen's prison, shattered, Kalin's lips thinned, composure ice-like. The order's work, centuries in the weaving, couldn't unravel now. Dragons as weapons, humans as wielders. That was the path to dominion, not this reckless meddling. He activated a secure channel, voice calm as he dispatched the strike team. Elite binders, cryomancers honed for capture. Intercept at the southern pass, secure the frostwake, eliminate the tempered unit, no survivors to whisper. The team moved like shadows through the blizzards, boots crunching over brittle snow that gave way to hidden crevasses. Mira led the way, her breath fogging the air in sharp bursts, the weight of Varen's presence a low rumble behind them. The ancient dragon lumbered at a distance, his scales blending with the whiteout, but his shadow stretched long, even in the storm's fury. Lys huddled close to Thomas, her gloved hands trembling not just from the cold. The dead glacier's edge loomed ahead, a jagged maw where the world seemed to end in ice. Refuge Pass Station materialized out of the gale like a half-buried fortress, its prefab walls groaning under fresh drifts. Mira signaled a halt at the perimeter, scanning the chaos through her visor. What should have been an orderly outpost buzzed with desperation. Refugees crammed into every corner, their faces gaunt under hoods, hauling crates and children through the wind-whipped gates. Shouts cut through the howl. "Storm's turning! Get the young ones inside!" She pushed forward, Thomas at her flank, Lys trailing with wide eyes. Varen hung back in the shadows of a nearby ridge, his massive form coiled low to avoid drawing eyes. But as Mira reached the main hangar, a sudden roar shook the ground, not thunder but ice cracking like gunfire. A spontaneous storm erupted from nowhere, walls of razor-sharp hail slamming down 50 meters from the entrance. Screams pierced the air as a cluster of civilians staggered. One man buried under a collapsing drift, his arm flailing before going still. Mira's gut twisted. Varen's warning echoed in her mind. The freeze was quickening, devouring the fringes faster than any forecast. She barked orders into her comm. "Tomas, secure a path. Lys, stay sharp." But the sight hit harder than the cold. These weren't soldiers. They were families fleeing the same encroaching doom, trapped now by tempests that hadn't raged this fierce in her lifetime. Inside the hangar, the air stank of unwashed bodies and fuel oil. Medics triaged frostbite cases on cots shoved against humming generators, while officers coordinated relief drops that weren't coming fast enough. Mira flashed her Vanguard insignia at the harried station commander, a wiry major named Ellis, who looked like he'd aged a decade in the last week. "Captain Cade," he said, voice gravelly over the din, "heard you were inbound with assets, but we're at capacity. Storms hit without warning, lost 3 supply runs already. Civilians pouring in from the outer holds." She nodded curtly, glancing at the refugees huddled by the walls, their eyes hollow. "The Dragon's intel checks out. It's accelerating. We need to move him to secure quarters before—" A klaxon blared, cutting her off. The hangar doors hissed open again, admitting a squad in crisp white and silver fatigues, rifles slung but hands ready. They weren't refugees. Their leader, a tall woman with a scar bisecting her lip, strode forward like she owned the place, flanked by 6 others who moved with the precision of elites. Reinforcements, Mira thought. At least, that's what their patches claimed. But something in their eyes, cold and appraising, set her teeth on edge. "Captain Cade," the woman said, her voice smooth as polished ice. "Inquisitor Vara, Order of the Pale Sun. We're here to assume custody of the defector, Lys Arden, and evaluate your draconic acquisition." She held out a data slate, its screen glowing with what looked like official orders, seals from high command, time stamps fresh. Mira's hand hovered near her sidearm, forged probably. The order didn't announce itself like this. "Custody, she's under my command, and the dragon's no acquisition, he's an ally." Vara's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Allies can be liabilities, Captain, especially ones that breathe fire in a freeze. Hand them over, and we'll ensure relief convoys keep flowing. Refuse, and this station starves. Your call." Thomas shifted beside her, his fingers tightening on his rifle strap. Lys went rigid, her breath hitching as she stared past Vara at the strike team's rear ranks. There, half hidden in the shadows of the doorway, stood a gaunt man in hooded robes, his face etched with ritual scars. Lys's former mentor, Brother Eland, the one who drilled the Order's doctrines into her since childhood. I have to go," Lys whispered, stepping forward, her voice cracking. "They'll understand. I can explain—" A thunderous thud shook the hangar, vibrating through the metal floor. The doors buckled inward as Varen's massive skull pressed against them from outside, his icy blue eyes gleaming through the narrowing gap. Frost spiderwebbed across the seams, and his voice rumbled like grinding glaciers, audible even through the barrier. "The leash calls again, little one. Resist it. They bound me once. I will not watch you kneel." Lise froze, torn, her hands clenching at her sides. The strike team leveled weapons, murmurs rippling through the refugees. Vara's composure cracked, her scar twisting. "Stand down, or we open fire on the beast and your people." Mira's mind raced, weighing the odds. Hand over Lise and Varen, and the Order gets their prize. The Freeze be damned. Fight, and the station becomes a battlefield, civilians in the crossfire. But Varen's warning burned fresh. The world was ending, and these weren't saviors. They were slavers. She met Thomas's gaze, saw the quiet resolve there, then nodded once. "No," she said, drawing her pistol. "The dragon stays free, so does she." The hangar erupted. Vara's team fired first, suppressed rounds stitching the air, forcing Mira to dive behind a crate stack. Tomas returned fire, his shots precise, dropping one assailant who lunged for Lise. But the firefight spilled outward, bullets ricocheting off walls into the civilian zones. A woman screamed as a stray round clipped her shoulder, her child wailing beside her. Refugees scattered, trampling supplies in the panic. "Tomas!" Mira shouted over the din, popping up to tag another soldier. "Cover the families, get them to the inner bays." He hesitated, eyes flicking to Varen's straining form at the doors, then cursed and pivoted, laying down suppressing fire toward a knot of attackers herding civilians. Ammo burned fast. He could have fortified the dragon's breach, bought them time to extract. Instead, he burned it shielding the innocent. His face, grim as a child, darted into the open and took a grazing hit. Pinned behind an overturned medcart, Mira reloaded, sweat stinging her eyes. The strike team closed in, Vara barking orders, their numbers swelling as more poured from a side access. Lise cowered nearby, her magic flickering uselessly in her palms, too scared to unleash it, too frozen to run. An enemy rounded the corner, rifle raised, and Mira fired, but another flanked them, grabbing Lisa's arm. "Now!" Mira yelled, but it was too late. Facing capture, eyes wild with terror, Lisa's control shattered. She thrust her hands out, channeling the forbidden right the Order had beaten into her. A wide area frostburst, raw and uncontrolled. Ice exploded outward in a howling wave, crystalline shards lancing through the air. It engulfed the nearest soldiers, freezing them mid-stride, limbs locked in rictus, faces etched in eternal surprise. But the blast didn't stop. It rolled into the civilian huddle Thomas had been guarding, swallowing a family whole. Parents and two small children, their forms encased in translucent tombs, eyes wide in final horror. The hangar fell silent save for the wind's moan. Lise stared at the frozen figures, her hands smoking with residual magic, horror twisting her features. "No, I didn't. They were just—" Vara's remaining team hesitated, then advanced again, capitalizing on the shock. Lise sagged, stepping toward them like a condemned prisoner, murmuring, "Take me, end it." Mira lunged, grabbing her collar and yanking her back. "Not today." She hauled Lise toward the buckled doors as return fire chipped the ice around them. "Varen, up! Get us out!" The dragon roared, shoving the doors wide with a screech of tearing metal. Cold air flooded in, but so did salvation. He reared, wings unfurling like storm sails, and launched into the sky with a beat that shook snow from the rafters. From above he dove, mouth opening to unleash a precise barrage of frostfire, not wild flame but a controlled lance of superheated ice that melted stone to slag. It carved a molten scar across the pass wall, vaporizing Vara and half her team in a blaze of steam and ruin. The survivors scattered, screaming as the structure groaned, threatening collapse. Mira and the others piled into a waiting skiff, Tomas gunning the engine as Varen circled overhead, his shadow a protective shroud. The station receded in flames and ice, the frozen family a ghost in Mira's mind. Lise curled in the corner, silent tears carving tracks down her cheeks. Mira's breath fogged the dim glow of the depot's tactical console, the air thick with the tang of overheated circuits and stale rations. The remote Vanguard outpost hunkered on the glacier's edge like a forgotten relic, its walls groaning under fresh ice buildup. She hunched over the flickering screen, fingers flying across the keys, forging the orders that would carve her out of the chain of command. No more petitions to brass who saw her as a liability. Her loyalists, 30-odd souls who'd stuck with her through the past massacre, would become an independent task force, authorized only by the emergency she herself declared, the world freeze creeping south, devouring settlements in its crystalline grip. She stamped the digital seal with a ghosted signature, her own, and routed it through anonymous relays. Severed. The word settled in her gut like frostbite. No turning back now. The console beeped confirmation, and Mira leaned back, rubbing her eyes against the strain. Outside, the wind howled, carrying whispers of the unnatural cold that had already claimed too many. The door hissed open behind her, and Thomas stepped in, his boots crunching frost from the corridor. His face was etched with the kind of exhaustion that came from too many sleepless shifts, but his eyes, sharp, unyielding, locked on her immediately. He carried a crate of field rations under one arm, setting it down with deliberate care. "Captain," he said, voice low but edged. "Or should I say, ex-captain, I saw the transmission logs." Mira didn't turn. "It's done, Thomas. We're cut loose. Better this way. No more orders from idiots who think sacrificing squads buys progress." He crossed the room in 3 strides, slamming a printout of her forged directive onto the console. "Forged? You mean lied? And what about the pass? Those civilians we couldn't save because we were too busy dodging dragonfire and ice storms. You keep pushing this alliance with the beast, and now you're playing God with our chain of command. Where's the line, Mira? When do we stop pretending dragon power won't burn us all?" She met his gaze then, the weight of his words pressing like the depot's thickening walls. Tomas had always been the steady one, the quartermaster who turned scraps into survival. But since his brother's death in that botched op, the one that got her demoted, he'd carried a quiet fracture, a fear of blindness to the cost. "The line," she said evenly, "is when we let the freeze take everything without fighting back. Varen's not a weapon, he's a chance. We coordinate, we control it." "Control?" Thomas's laugh was bitter, stripped of humor. "You saw what he did at the rift. One breath and half the slope's gone. Civilians caught in the slide. Define the line for me, because I'm starting to wonder if you're seeing it anymore." He paused, glancing away, and Mira caught the flicker. Guilt, maybe, or something hidden. Unseen by her, he'd already begun siphoning medical kits from the stores, bundling them for the handful of volunteers whispering about desertion. Not betrayal, not yet, but a fracture she couldn't afford. Before she could press, the alert chime cut through. Training grounds. Time to face the dragon. The squad assembled in the depot's outer yard, a scarred expanse of packed snow ringed by rusted artillery emplacements. Varen loomed at the center, his scales a mosaic of glacial blue and silver, each breath sending ripples of frost across the ground. Majestic, yes, wings folded like storm sails, eyes like fractured sapphires, but terrifying in his sheer mass, a living avalanche coiled with ancient fury. The humans kept their distance, rifles slung but hands twitching, as he unfurled a wing to demonstrate flight vectors. "Precision," Varen rumbled, voice like grinding ice directed at Mira's squad. "Your cannons are toys, but aim true. They extend my reach. I soar here." He swept a talon across the snow, tracing an arc, drawing fire while you target the flanks. My breath becomes a scalpel, not a hammer. Freeze the enemy's advance. Shatter their lines with your shells. Mira nodded, signaling her gunners to simulate a barrage. The first volley cracked the air, shells whistling past Varen's flank as he launched skyward, a thunderclap of wind battering the squad. He banked low, exhaling a controlled plume that iced a mock target, a derelict snowcat, in seconds, its hull cracking like brittle bone. The humans cheered uneasily, but Mira saw the unease ripple. One private muttered about inviting the devil to dinner. Varen landed with a tremor, folding his wings. Ruthless efficiency saves lives. Hesitate and the cold claims you. Suggest we test on live foes next. Cull the weak to hone the strike. The squad shifted, glances darting to Mira. She stepped forward, meeting his gaze. We train, not execute, that's the deal. His snort sent frost across her parka. A reminder of the chasm between predator and prey. Uneasy alliance, indeed. His power awe-inspiring, but his worldview a blade too sharp for human hands. Inside the comms shack, Lise hunched over a jury-rigged holotable, her fingers tracing glowing runes that danced between Varen's shared memories and satellite feeds. The young cryomancer's face was pale, strained, her order tattoos, faint spirals of ice-blue ink, pulsing faintly under her sleeves. She'd defected weeks ago, but the brittle edge of her faith lingered, a flaw that made her brilliant but unpredictable. Mira watched from the doorway as Lise cross-referenced the data. Varen's ancient recollections flooded the display. Visions of betrayal, chains of enchanted ice binding him in the glacier's heart. Layered over modern scans, patterns emerged, a vortex of impossible cold, swelling like a tumor. There, Lise whispered, zooming in. The image sharpened on jagged spires piercing the snow. The ruined Cathedral of Suns, an order bastion abandoned after the collapse. Beneath it, the Nexus. Kellens reactivated the old rites, binding anchors, pulling glacial essence to fuel the freeze. It's not natural, it's engineered, to force submission. Mira's pulse quickened, the cathedral, deep in contested territory, crawling with zealots. Distance? 2 days hard push, but the cold's accelerating, spikes every hour. Varen's shadow filled the doorway behind her, his presence a chill draft. Strike now, bypass the villages, their lives are chaff in the wind. Mira paced the shack, maps unrolling in her mind. The route to the cathedral threaded civilian outposts, frontier hamlets already icing over. Families huddled against the encroaching white. Bypass them, and she could hit fast, end the ritual before it peaked. But the screams from the pass echoed in her skull. No more ghosts on her conscience. No, she said finally, voice steel. We carve an evacuation corridor. Slow us by half a day, but it gives them a shot. Load the transports, priority on non-coms. Varen's eyes narrowed, a low growl vibrating the floor. Mercy is a chain, human. Decisive force ends wars. Rescues breed hesitation. Friction sparked between them, his predatory calculus clashing with her stubborn code. Mira held firm, but doubt gnawed. Was she saving lives or dooming them all to the freeze? Word of the corridor spread like frost on glass, and Callan Mar seized it. From his shadowed sanctum in the cathedral's depths, the High Inquisitor dispatched saboteurs, cloaked acolytes slipping through the whiteout like specters. They tainted fuel caches along the route, glycol laced with cryomantic venom that turned diesel to brittle sludge. Thomas felt the backlash first. Holed up in the depot's motor pool, he barked orders as scouts reported the sabotage. Overland convoys now, no choice. Push the rigs through the drifts. His volunteers loaded sleds under floodlights, faces grim. The runs were suicide, howling gales, crevasses yawning like traps. One convoy vanished into a whiteout, radio cutting to static. When the survivors staggered back, Tomas was there, hauling a wounded man from the snow. But not all returned. Private Ellis, his close friend from the old logistics days, the one who'd cracked jokes over frozen MREs, lay still in the drift. Chest holed by ambush fire from hidden saboteurs. Blood froze black on the snow. Tomas knelt, gloved hand pressing uselessly, rage and grief twisting his features. Several volunteers died that night, and 2 more slipped away in the chaos, Tomas's secret stockpiles vanishing with them. Loyalty frayed, but he swallowed it, reporting to Mira with hollow eyes. Corridors open, but we're paying in blood. Kalen's playing us. News hit like a blizzard. Mira's defiance branded treason. Vanguard broadcasts crackled with orders. Hunt the rogue captain, neutralize the dragon abomination. Her squad gathered in the yard as dawn bled gray light, faces taut with the weight of it all. Mira pulled the insignia from her collar, the embroidered Vanguard eagle cold in her palm. She struck a flare from the supply kit. The flare hissed to life in Mira's grip, its red glare cutting through the howling gale like a blade. She hurled it skyward, the signal blooming into a desperate star against the bruised heavens. Below, the cathedral ruins loomed from the storm's heart, a jagged crown of frost-crusted stone, half buried in the dead glacier's eternal white. Her task force crested the final ridge, breath ragged, boots crunching through knee-deep snow that burned like acid against exposed skin. Tomas flanked her left, his rifle slung low, eyes scanning the tree line where shadows twisted unnaturally. Varen lumbered at the rear, his massive form a silhouette of coiled muscle and iridescent scales. Wings folded tight against the wind's fury. Lise huddled in the center, her cryomantic aura flickering like a dying lantern. Hands clenched around the haft of her staff. They pushed forward, the storm's roar drowning out all but the crunch of their steps. Mira's pulse hammered in her ears, the weight of command a familiar ache. She'd led worse odds, frontier skirmishes against raider packs, ambushes in the ash wastes. But this felt different. The air hummed with wrongness, a vibration that clawed at her bones. As they breached the outer perimeter, the ruins revealed themselves in brutal clarity, towering ice spires thrust from the snow like frozen spears, each one pulsing with an inner light, veins of azure energy threading through the crystal. At the apex of every spire, a shape writhed. Lesser dragons, their scales dulled to gray, wings pinned by chains of enchanted rime. Half-frozen, eyes glazed with agony, they hung suspended. Bodies convulsing as ethereal streams of their essence funneled downward, feeding into a colossal engine at the cathedral's core. The machine squatted in the ruin's heart, a labyrinth of glacial gears and rune-etched obelisks, grinding out waves of cold that warped the air itself. Mira's stomach twisted. "Gods," she muttered, halting the line with a raised fist. The dragon's muffled roars echoed faintly, a chorus of torment that stirred something primal in her chest. Rage, yes, but laced with the old guilt, the faces of her lost squad flashing unbidden. These weren't beasts, they were prisoners, bled dry to power whatever hell the Order had wrought. The world freeze wasn't natural, it was engineered, a weapon turned on the land itself. Varen's growl rumbled through the ground, shaking snow from the spires. He reared up beside her, his frost-rimed horns scraping the sky, golden eyes narrowing on the bindings. From his vantage, the geometry unfolded like a nightmare revisited, the interlocking sigils carved into the ice, spirals of containment woven with human script and draconic runes. It was his prison, refined. 7 centuries ago, those same patterns had sealed him in the glacier's depths, siphoning his strength until betrayal's chill claimed him. But this was evolution, scaled for an army. Humans had taken his torture and made it a factory, twisting ancient wards into engines of dominion. A tremor ran through his colossal frame, not fear but a deep, seismic fury. His claws flexed, gouging furrows in the ice. These whelps, mere shadows of his kin, drained like cattle, their power harvested to cloak the world in eternal winter. The insult burned hotter than any flame. His people reduced to fuel for human ambition. He bared fangs like scimitars, the air around him crackling with restrained frostfire. No more isolation. This demanded reckoning. Lise staggered forward, her face paling as she traced the lattice's glow with trembling fingers. The control web pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, threads of magic resonating in her veins. Her bloodline, cursed legacy of the Order's founders, keyed it all. She could feel the hooks sinking in, the ritual's core designed for her kind, conduits born to channel the freeze. Dismantling it meant unraveling herself, pouring her life into the breach until nothing remained but shattered ice. Or she could step in, complete the weave under Callan's gaze, then twist it from within, subvert the engine, turn its power against the Order once it hummed to full chorus. The choice clawed at her, brittle resolve cracking under the weight of old doctrines. Dragons as weapons, yes, but humans wielding them unchecked. Her defection had been a spark. This was the inferno. Sweat beaded on her brow despite the cold, guilt coiling tight. atonement or survival, both paths led to blood. The storm surged then, winds coiling into a vortex that birthed a figure from the chaos. High Inquisitor Callan Mar materialized as a projection, his form woven from swirling snow and the lightning, robes billowing like shrouds. His face was a mask of serene command, eyes like polished steel, voice cutting through the gale with unnatural clarity. "Captain Cade," he intoned, gaze locking on her, "you've come far for a disgraced shadow. Behold the pale sun's mercy, a ritual to tame the wilds, to freeze only the threats that gnaw at our borders." Mira's jaw tightened, the flare's afterglow still warm in her hand. She stepped forward, rifle steady. "Mercy, you're flaying dragons to build a doomsday machine. This ends now." Callan's projection smiled faintly, a predator's patience. "Ends, or evolves. Submit the Frostwake and your ragged band to the Order. Bind him as the capstone, and I'll direct the freeze. Hostile wastes only, raiders and beasts encased in ice. Humanity rises unchallenged, your name redeemed in the annals. Refuse, and the engine claims all." The words hung like a noose. Mira glanced at Varen, his scales bristling, then at Thomas, whose face hardened with quiet disgust. Lyse averted her eyes, staff gripped, white-knuckled. The offer was poison. Safety for chains, dominance for souls. Her mind raced. Alliances with predators, yes, but not this enslavement, not on her watch. "No," she said, voice steel. "We break it." Callan's image flickered, amusement fading to ice. "Then burn." Mira barked orders, the plan crystallizing in the storm's frenzy. "Thomas, take the ground team. Free those dragons. Cut the feeds. Varen, rip the roof open. Expose the core. Lyse, you're on the sanctum. Sabotage the lattice from inside. Move." Thomas nodded grimly, rallying the squad. 8 souls, frostbitten and fierce, into the fray. They charged the outer spires, las fire cracking against automated wards that erupted from the snow like geysers of razor ice. Paladins in rune-etched plate materialized from the blizzard, blades humming with glacial enchantment. Cutting through the line with surgical brutality, bodies fell, screams swallowed by the wind. A soldier's arm sheared clean, another's chest caved by a ward's spike. Tomas fired from the hip, dropping a paladin, but the tide turned vicious. The enemy flanked hard, a counter-push surging toward the rear where civilian refugees huddled in the supply sleds. Non-combatants Mira had sworn to shield. His breath came in bursts, blood slicking his glove from a glancing wound. The bridge, a narrow ice span linking the spires to the main ruins, teemed with his wounded dragging themselves to cover. The flanking maneuver would slaughter them all, then roll into the civilians like an avalanche. No time for evac. Thomas yanked a demo charge from his pack, thumbed the activator. "Fall back," he roared to the survivors, then planted it mid-span. The explosion ripped through the gale, a thunderclap of shattering ice and screams. The bridge collapsed in a cascade of debris, taking the wounded with it, 5 lives gone in a blink to buy the line time. Tomas staggered, bile rising, the weight of their trust a fresh scar. Loyalty to Mira, yes, but this complicity, it hollowed him. High above, Varen launched skyward, wings unfurling like thunderheads. He slammed into the cathedral's vaulted roof, claws rending stone and ice in a storm of shards. The structure groaned, fissures spiderwebbing as he tore downward, exposing the engine's throbbing heart. Gears whined in protest, lesser dragons shrieking as their bonds loosened in the chaos. Deeper in, Lyse slipped through a side arch, the sanctum's chill wrapping her like a vice. The inner chamber pulsed with the lattice's glow, obelisks humming in symphony. Callan waited there, no projection now. Flesh and blood, his presence a gravitational pull of calm authority. He turned, eyes dissecting her fracture lines. "Lyse," he said softly, stepping closer, voice a scalpel. "You fled us, yet here you stand, blood singing to the right. The dragons will unravel everything, wildfire in the snow. Help me finish it, for the lesser evil, control, not chaos. Redeem your doubt." She froze, staff a-trembling, his words pried at her guilt, the orders grooming, the defectors she'd condemned in her mind. the power she feared slipping free. Visions flashed, Mira's trust, Varen's fury, a world iced over by unchecked ambition. The world freeze wasn't chaos, it was precision, a tool to reshape borders and crush dissent. Pulses of Arctic wind surged outward from the chamber's heart, visible now as shimmering veils of blue-white energy arcing through the arched windows. Mira felt the first one ripple past, chilling her sweat-slick skin, but the Order's citadel stood untouched, its wards glowing faintly. Beyond, reports from Thomas's comms crackled, rival nations' outposts vanishing under avalanches, supply lines severed, armies frozen mid-march. Kalen's strategy crystallized in her mind, selective apocalypse, a tool to carve out dominance while the world begged for mercy. Mira's breath came sharp, her pulse hammering against the scar on her collarbone from that long-ago betrayal. Killing Lise would end it. One clean shot through the ritual's nexus, where the girl's body fused with the glacial core, pulsing like a second heart. But that would doom the bound dragons below, their essences woven into the engine's weave, and shatter whatever fragile trust Varen had placed in her. Let the Order win, and humanity became slavers on a frozen throne. No, she wouldn't choose extinction for anyone. Thomas, Mira hissed into her comm, crouched behind a pillar etched with binding runes. The sergeant was already moving, his toolkit clanking softly as he slithered through the shadows toward the chamber's undercroft access. Charges under the core now. Standard demo, but rig for cascade. Hit the supports first. Copy, Thomas grunted, his voice strained but steady. Gives us 30 seconds tops before it feedbacks. You sure about this? No time for doubt. Mira glanced skyward where the vaulted ceiling groaned under the ritual's strain. Varen circled outside, his massive form a silhouette against the storm-lashed sky, wings beating thunder against the gale. She keyed her external channel. Frostwake, talk to me. We strike now or bury the world. The dragon's mind voice rumbled into her thoughts, laced with ancient disdain and the raw edge of pain from his thawing wounds. The girl is the linchpin, human. Sever her and the pulses halt. But the cost? Not paying it, Mira snapped, dodging a stray bolt of ritual lightning that scorched the floor. Kalen's paladins fanned out, their armor humming with cryo wards, eyes scanning for intruders. Precision hit. You dive when I signal, tear the roof, expose the core. A pause, heavy as mountain stone. Then Varen's presence sharpened, probing her resolve. There is a way, unthinkable even for my kind. His wings tilted, banking closer to the citadel's spires. My heart scales, shatter one. Bind its essence to your crude fire powders. The agony will birth an anti-weave, a shock to unravel the ritual locally. No global cataclysm, but it demands my pain and yours to wield it. Mira's stomach twisted, heart scales, the armored plates guarding a dragon's core infused with their primal magic. Shattering one meant exposing Varen's life force, a wound that could fell lesser beasts. And binding it? She'd seen what raw, draconic power did to human tech, explosives turning volatile, unpredictable, but it fit. A predator's heart turned against the chains. Do it, she said, voice low. I'm coming to you. She broke cover, rifle barking suppressed rounds at the nearest paladin. The man jerked, ice-crusted plate crumpling, but more surged forward. Mira rolled, her shoulders screaming from the impact, and sprinted for the outer balcony. The storm hit her like a wall, wind howling, snow lashing her faceplate. Varen landed with a earth-shaking thud on the ledge, his scales dulled from centuries in ice, but his eyes burned like forge embers. He lowered his massive head, breath steaming in plumes that could freeze blood. Quickly, he urged, mind voice tight. One foreclaw extended, revealing the underbelly where scales gleamed iridescent. Mira climbed, boots finding purchase on his hide, rifle slung. Her knife felt laughably small against the scale he indicated, a thumb-sized plate pulsing faintly with inner light. I'm sorry, she whispered more to herself. The blade bit in, cracking the scale with a sound like breaking bone. Varen's body convulsed, a guttural roar tearing from his throat that shook the balcony. Blood, dark, viscous, smelling of ozone and ancient storms, welled up. Mira caught the fragment as it fell, wrapping it in her gauntlet before the essence could dissipate. It burned through the metal, searing her palm, but she gritted through it, sliding the shard into her demo pouch. Already the air around it warped, human explosives humming in response. "Go!" Varen snarled, launching skyward with a beat of wings that nearly flung her off. "I follow." Back inside, chaos erupted. Mira rejoined Thomas at the Undercroft breach, the air thick with the tang of melting ice and ozone. "Scales bound. It'll amplify the blast. Anti-magic pulse." Thomas's face paled under his visor, but he nodded, wiring the final charge. "Like hitching a storm to a firecracker. Pray it doesn't take us with it." Explosions rocked the lower levels. Order reinforcements breaching. They pushed into the assault run. Corridor narrowing to a choke point, a vaulted hall lined with cryo turrets. Paladins poured in, elite in rune-etched plate, blades humming with frost. Mira laid down fire, picking off two, but they closed fast. "Tomas, hold here, I need to plant." He didn't hesitate, barricading the arch with overturned crates and his own body. "Go, Captain, I've got you." His rifle chattered, dropping another, but a paladin's glaive caught him across the thigh, severing armor and flesh. Blood sprayed hot and red against the cold stone. Thomas fired one-handed, screaming defiance as more pressed. Mira hesitated a heartbeat. His eyes met hers, wide with pain but fierce. No words, just a nod. She ran, heart pounding, planting charges along the core's base. The ritual chamber loomed ahead, Lisa's form suspended in a cage of ice and light. Callan chanting from the dais. Varen's roar split the air outside, dive commencing. Mira hit the trigger as the roof caved. Varen crashed through in a storm of stone and lightning, ritual bolts shearing his left wing in a spray of scales and ichor. He bellowed, coiling protectively, but the synchronized blast followed, heart-scale essence erupting in a contained inferno. The shockwave hit like a thunderclap, anti-magic rippling outward, shattering the ritual's weave. Lyse screamed, torn free, her body slamming to the floor amid cracking ice. Callan's wards flickered, his composure cracking for the first time, eyes widening in fury as he staggered back. The dragon's magic recoiled violently. Varen slumped, wings folding, his innate power unraveling in threads of fading light. Centuries of Frostwake essence gone in an instant, leaving him hollowed, mortal in ways he hadn't been since his youth. Lyse gasped on the ground, half her robes charred, skin blistered from arcane backlash. Her eyes cleared for a precious second, lucidity piercing the pain. The ritual's remnants swirled chaotically, unbound energy seeking outlet. With a trembling hand, she seized it, redirecting the flow not outward but downward, into the engine's depths where the bound dragons slumbered. A cascade of cracks echoed through the citadel, like 1,000 chains snapping. The freed beasts stirred below, their roars muffled but rising, a chorus of rage and confusion. In that redirection, something deeper imprinted. Mira's tactics, her willingness to wield a dragon's agony as strategy, etched into the draconic gestalt. Not just freedom, but the lesson of human war, sacrifice as weapon. Pain forged into precision. The storm ebbed, winds dying to whispers. Callan vanished into a side passage, shadows swallowing him, fail-safes activating no doubt. Mira knelt by Lyse, checking her pulse, as Varen dragged himself upright, wing trailing blood. Outside, the freed dragons emerged from the Undercroft ruins, massive forms silhouetted against the clearing sky, dozens, eyes gleaming with trauma and wariness. The wind howled through the fractured spires of the cathedral, carrying flecks of ice that stung like accusations. Mira's boots crunched over shattered stone, her breath fogging in the dim light filtering through the storm-torn roof. Her side throbbed where a rib had cracked during the collapse, but she pushed on, rifle slung low, eyes locked on the faint glow ahead. Callan couldn't have gone far. The reliquary's hidden door yawned open like a wound, its wards flickering weakly against the chaos outside. She slipped inside, the air turning thick and cold, laced with the metallic tang of old blood and incantations. The chamber was a vault of frozen relics, dragon scales etched with runes, chains that hummed with trapped fury, and at the center, Callan Mar himself. He stood before a crystalline console, fingers dancing over its surface, pulling threads of glacial magic from the ether. His robes were torn, his face a mask of calculated calm, but Mira saw the tremor in his hands. The man who had orchestrated empires from shadows was cornered. "You've come to bargain, Captain Cade," he said without turning, his voice smooth as polished ice. "Or to finish what you started." Mira leveled her rifle, the barrel steady despite the fire in her lungs. No bargains, just answers. Why unleash the freeze now? After all this? Callan pivoted slowly, his eyes gleaming with that unyielding conviction. "To save us. The dragons are loose, Mira. Your doing, or Varen's. Humanity cowers, fractures under the fear. But I can rebuild it, the world freeze, refined, under your command. A deterrent, one pull of the trigger, and the ice claims our enemies before they claim us. Without it, we'll tear ourselves apart chasing draconic tails." She stepped closer, the reliquary's chill seeping into her bones. His words twisted like a knife, pragmatic, almost seductive. Rebuild the weapon that had nearly ended everything, but this time as her leash on the world. Thomas's face flashed in her mind, his last shout lost in the avalanche of betrayal. No. She'd lost too much to chain the future to more chains. "Humanity doesn't need another apocalypse to feel safe," she growled. "We need to stop being monsters." Callan's smile was thin, pitying, naive. "Even you see it. The dragons will come for us. Give me the order, and I'll make you the guardian they fear." Mira lunged, slamming the rifle butt into his wrist. He gasped, the console sparking as his hands fell away. She dragged him to the broadcast array, a web of amplifiers jury-rigged into the cathedral's lingering ritual nodes. "Confess," she snarled, forcing his palm onto the activation rune. It burned against his skin, drawing blood that seeped into the crystal. "Tell them everything, the bindings, the enslavements, the freeze you engineered to justify it all." He resisted, jaw clenched, but the array hummed to life, its signal ripping through the ether toward every command outpost, every flickering holoscreen in the northern holds. Callan's voice broke, compelled by the right's pull. "I am High Inquisitor Callan Mar of the Order of the Pale Sun. We forged the chains, imprisoned the worms as weapons. The freeze was our lever to bend the world to our will. Witness our sins." The words echoed, raw and damning, broadcasting across the fractured networks. Mira watched the console light up with acknowledgments. Shock rippling through distant barracks, councils erupting in fury. Callan's empire crumbled in real time, his allies turning like wolves, scenting weakness. But as the signal faded, so did the fragile trust holding human command together. Whispers of mutiny, purges, alliances shattering, chaos, the kind that birthed wars. "You've doomed us both," Callan whispered, slumping against the console, his composure cracking at last. Mira holstered her weapon, tasting ash in her mouth. "Better chaos than your order." Outside, the storm raged on, but deeper in the ruins, another gathering stirred. Varen's scales, once a cascade of iridescent frost, now dulled to cracked gray, scraped against the stone as he coiled in the cavernous nave. Pain lanced through him with every breath. His wounds from the binding's backlash refused to knit. The ancient magic that had sustained him for centuries leached away by the shattered rites. He was a shadow of the frostwake, his wings heavy, his fire a guttering ember. The freed dragons encircled him, their forms a thunderhead of muscle and claw. Sereth with her venom-laced spines, Korvath, whose roar could split glaciers. Their eyes burned with the raw edge of liberation, but Varen felt the weight of their stares. "The humans plot anew," he rumbled, his voice a grinding avalanche. "Their order may fall, but seeds of it linger. Strike now, raise their strongholds, their forges before another cage rises." Sereth's tail lashed, shattering a pillar. "Yes, burn the slavers from the earth." Korvath nodded, flames licking his jaws. "We owe them nothing but ash." But Varen hesitated, his massive head lowering. The memory clawed at him. Lise Arden, the fragile human conduit, her body a conduit of agony as she unraveled the bindings. Not for glory, but in shared torment, her screams mingling with theirs as the ice prison fractured. She'd paid with her essence, freeing them not as a conqueror, but as one broken by the same chains. The cryomancer. She bled for us. Does slaughter honor that? The dragons shifted, murmurs rippling like wind through wings. Annihilation hung in the balance, a spark away from genocidal fire. Mira emerged from the reliquary, Callan bound at her side, and strode into the nave. The dragon's shadows engulfed her, their heat and frost warring in the air. She didn't flinch, though her heart hammered. Tomas was gone, crushed in the collapse, his last words a curse on the order that had twisted them all. Her nation, the vanguard, would brand her traitor now, the broadcast her noose. But this was the line. "Varen," she called, voice cutting through the tension. "No war, not like this." The dragon's eye fixed on her, vast and weary. "You presume to command us, little tactician?" "Not command, offer." She stepped forward, shedding her rifle. "Palms open. Bind us instead. Absolute freedom for your kind, the skies, the wilds, no human hand to claim them. In return, we dismantle every right, every chain, every scrap of binding knowledge, burn the libraries, shatter the relics. And if we break it," she swallowed, the words leaden, "execute me, my life as collateral. Let it be known, I stake everything on this." The dragons rumbled, disbelief and fury coiling. Varen's breath washed over her, cold enough to frost her lashes. "You would die for your kind's leash?" "For a chance at peace, real peace, not your ashes, not our ice." From the shadows, a gasp echoed. Lise Arden crawled into the light, her skin pallid, veins glowing faintly with the dregs of her power. Blood trickled from her nose, her body a ruin from the ritual's recoil. Guilt etched her face. Deeper than any wound, the defector who'd unleashed hell only to watch it consume her world. "It's not enough," she rasped, dragging herself toward the nave's central altar, where the cathedral's architecture still pulsed with latent magic. "Words break, make it bind." Varen's tail curled protectively, but Lise waved him off, her hands trembling as they traced the runes. "I owe this. To them. To you." Magic surged, a final torrent from her core, her life threading into the stone like roots into soil. She screamed, body arching as the accord wove itself. Dragons unbound, humans cursed to recoil if they dared collar again. The air thrummed, the architecture sealing it with a crack like thunder. Lise collapsed, her glow fading, breath stuttering to silence. Her sacrifice etched the law into the world's bones. Any mass binding would turn inward, glaciers claiming the enslavers first. The dragons fell silent, awe tempering their rage. Sereth bowed her head, Korvath's flames dimmed. Callan laughed bitterly from his bonds, but a dragon's claw hooked him, dragging him into the depths. His fate vanished into the dark, torments no human eye would see, a justice as merciless as the ice. Mira sank to her knees beside Lisa's still form, the weight crashing down. Tomas, gone, her commission revoked in the broadcast's wake. The vanguard would hunt her as the architect of mistrust, but as Varen's gaze met hers, something shifted, a tenuous thread, trust forged in mutual ruin. "I choose exile," Varen said softly, wings unfurling with effort. "No throne for a weakened king. Rule your own, Miracade. You are the human we name." He launched into the sky, a fading silhouette against the clearing storm, leaving the world to reckon with the fragile peace etched in ice and blood.